Galactic slavers took a human diplomat hostage. Earth answered with a ninja. The vast hall of the interstellar summit glimmered with lights from dozens of alien species. Each delegate represented a planet, a culture, a history spanning centuries. Humans had been part of these meetings for only a few decades, and many species still underestimated them. They saw Earth as young, small, and inexperienced, a planet of minor influence in galactic politics. But humans carried something else, something subtle yet powerful: determination. Amid the bustling delegates, Ambassador Lena Hart, Earth's youngest diplomat to ever attend the summit, moved gracefully, smiling and exchanging courteous words. Her voice, soft yet confident, was heard as she spoke about trade, cooperation, and peace. The other delegates respected her professionalism, even those who doubted humanity's weight in interstellar affairs. Nobody expected what came next. The Karth Syndicate, known across several star systems as slavers and manipulators, struck without warning. A sudden flash of light disoriented the room. Security systems reacted, but the Syndicate had anticipated every alarm. In seconds, Ambassador Hart was taken. She vanished from the hall as if swallowed by the station itself. Chaos erupted. Shouts filled the room in alien tones, alarms blared, and panic spread among the delegates. But the Syndicate did not aim to kill. They wanted leverage, a show of power to remind everyone that humans, despite their reputation, were vulnerable. Across the galaxy, news of the hostage spread like wildfire. Analysts predicted Earth would panic, that military fleets would mobilize, that humans would try to negotiate desperately. Many species laughed quietly, expecting an easy victory for the Syndicate. Back on Earth, the response was nothing like what the galaxy expected. The president spoke calmly to the press, her tone steady, almost eerily so. Ambassador Hart is safe. We are in communication with the relevant authorities. We ask for patience while we work to secure her return. There was no panic, no threats, no promises of retaliation. Only calm assurance. Behind the closed doors of the United Earth Council, however, the real plan was unfolding. This plan was ancient, known only to a select few, and had been kept secret for generations. It was called Protocol Silent Read, a method of action so precise, so discreet, that its effectiveness relied entirely on the target underestimating it. At the center of this plan was not a fleet, not weapons of mass destruction, and not an army. It was one individual, a specialist trained in infiltration, intelligence, and subtle problem-solving. Earth did not call this person a soldier. To most, they were a myth. To the Council, they were simply known as the Cultural Recovery Specialist. The specialist had been in hiding, waiting for a time when their unique skills would be needed. Unlike soldiers trained for large-scale battles, this operative focused on subtlety, patience, and strategy. Every movement was calculated. Every decision was precise. And now, with Ambassador Hart taken, the specialist was awake, preparing to act. The Karth Syndicate, confident in their triumph, continued their operations. They celebrated their soon-to-be victory, unaware that the balance had already shifted. The station's security systems were gradually being manipulated. Cameras looped the wrong footage. Key doors were quietly unlocked. Guards found themselves reassigned to non-critical areas without explanation. The Syndicate's confidence blinded them to the small, almost invisible signs of change around them. Ambassador Hart, despite being surrounded by the Syndicate's operatives, remained composed. She noticed subtle anomalies: a corridor door left slightly ajar, a guard absent from his post, whispers in the distance that didn't belong. Each observation gave her hope. She began to suspect that her rescue was closer than it seemed, even if she could not see it yet. Meanwhile, the specialist moved through the shadows of the station. Their presence was undetectable. They did not rush, did not strike. Instead, they acted like water, flowing into gaps and cracks in the Syndicate's operations. Every misstep of the Syndicate was subtly encouraged, every weakness amplified without anyone realizing it. Messages began to reach the Syndicate leaders, appearing as if from nowhere. The content was precise, personal, and disorienting. They were informed of details only they thought were secret: financial accounts, past betrayals, and minor errors that had gone unnoticed. Fear crept in, unannounced but undeniable. The Syndicate began to turn inward, scrutinizing each other, doubting their own people. Ambassador Hart noticed the change. Guards no longer seemed confident, leaders appeared unsettled, and small mistakes became frequent. She did not know why, but hope returned. She realized that her situation, though still dangerous, was no longer hopeless. The specialist continued to work methodically. In a series of careful steps, they disconnected the syndicate from communications, misled patrols, and ensured that critical points of the station were now open to exploitation. It was not a violent attack. It was a dismantling of the syndicate's confidence and infrastructure from within. By the time the syndicate realized something was happening, the specialist had already anticipated their reaction and adjusted accordingly. The galaxy, watching the events unfold from afar, remained oblivious. Analysts and other diplomats speculated endlessly, trying to predict Earth's next move. They suggested that fleets would be sent, that weapons would be deployed, that humans would act rashly. But Earth's approach was different. It was calm, it was invisible, it was precise, and it was already succeeding. For Ambassador Hart, the most remarkable aspect was the lack of overt violence. She had been prepared for a rescue full of chaos, perhaps a firefight or a daring escape. Instead, the rescue was happening in silence. Every misstep the syndicate made was orchestrated, leading them to weaken themselves without even realizing it. In the control room of the syndicate's flagship, the leaders grew anxious. Their data streams showed anomalies they could not explain. Doors they thought secured opened without reason. Reports from their own operatives contradicted each other. Panic began to ripple through their ranks, subtle at first, then more evident. The specialist, moving like a shadow, exploited this growing tension. Every action was deliberate, every small change causing ripple effects. By the time the syndicate understood that something was happening, the process was already too far advanced. Their systems were compromised, their trust in each other was fraying, and their sense of control had vanished. Back on Earth, the Council observed silently. They monitored every move, every anomaly, and every report. They did not intervene directly. They did not need to. The specialist's plan was unfolding exactly as intended. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once again, and the results were becoming clear. Ambassador Hart, sensing the shift, allowed herself a small smile. The signs were subtle but undeniable. The syndicate's grip on the station was weakening. The odds were no longer entirely against her. Humanity had sent its response, not through overwhelming force, not through threats, but through strategy, patience, and precision. As the day drew on, the specialist continued their silent work. Every movement, every adjustment, was bringing them closer to the moment when Ambassador Hart could be freed. There would be no explosions, no dramatic showdowns. There would be only the quiet dismantling of a threat, leaving the galaxy to wonder how it had happened. The Karth Syndicate, confident in their dominance, remained unaware of the invisible hand turning against them. The galaxy, meanwhile, continued to speculate, misunderstanding humanity's strength. They saw only calm, measured responses and assumed weakness. They did not realize that Earth's approach was deliberate, patient, and devastatingly effective. And so the stage was set. Ambassador Hart waited, observing small changes and holding on to hope. The specialist moved silently, preparing for the next steps. The syndicate's confidence wavered, and the galaxy remained oblivious. Humanity's quiet power was unfolding, and the first part of this story was drawing to a close, leaving only one certainty. The galaxy had misjudged Earth, and it was a mistake that would soon become apparent. The syndicate's leaders paced nervously in their private chamber. Every report they received only made the situation more confusing. Security cameras showed nothing unusual, yet every routine system seemed to fail at the worst moments. Doors opened on their own, messages appeared in private consoles, and some of their own operatives were missing without explanation. Fear had begun to whisper in the back of their minds. Meanwhile, the specialist moved like a shadow through the station. There was no hurry, no panic in their steps. Each movement was deliberate, every action calculated to create the maximum effect without detection. The specialist knew the syndicate's routines, their schedules, and even their predictable patterns of overconfidence. Slowly, methodically, the foundations of the syndicate's control began to weaken. Ambassador Hart noticed the subtle shifts around her. The guards, once confident and rigid, hesitated in their movements. Leaders barked orders, only to find them ignored or misdirected. The human diplomat realized that help had arrived, though she still could not see the one orchestrating it. She had no doubt now that Earth had sent someone skilled, someone capable of turning the entire situation without a single battle. The specialist created diversions that seemed random but were anything but. A hallway would appear blocked, causing guards to reroute themselves. A system alert would mislead the syndicate's operators, sending them chasing non-existent threats. Small miscommunications grew into confusion, which then spread to doubt and eventually fear. By the time the syndicate began to understand that something was going wrong, it was already too late. In one control hub, the syndicate's leaders discovered that their communications with the outside were being intercepted. Every message, every attempt to reach allies or demand reinforcements, returned with delays or errors. The leaders could no longer trust their own systems. The specialist had manipulated the network to make the syndicate doubt their technology, the very thing they had relied upon for years. Ambassador Hart watched quietly as the syndicate's structure slowly unraveled. She noted the tension between the leaders, the way small errors sparked arguments, and how panic began to replace the confidence they had once shown. She could feel the change in the atmosphere, calm replaced by uncertainty, authority replaced by hesitation. Humanity's quiet strength was working. The specialist moved closer to the diplomat, using routes that were invisible to the syndicate. Every access point was already prepared, every guard distracted or rerouted. When the time came, extraction would be effortless, almost unnoticed. The specialist didn't rush. Patience was the key and timing was everything. In the syndicate's main chamber, a sudden quiet fell. Leaders whispered among themselves, sharing their fears. They began to accuse each other of incompetence, of betrayal. A single mistake by one had amplified across the entire station. Their control was slipping, and no one could understand why. The specialist's work had made them dismantle themselves from within. Ambassador Hart allowed herself a small smile. She had trained for diplomacy, for patience, and for observation. Now those skills were paying off. She noticed that the doors in her corridor were no longer locked. The guards nearby seemed distracted, their attention elsewhere. The specialist had created a window, and soon, that window would allow her to leave safely. As the specialist approached the final control point, the last of the syndicate's security measures fell. Doors unlocked automatically, pathways cleared, and critical systems quietly rerouted. Every piece of the station that could have blocked the rescue had been neutralized without a fight. The specialist moved silently unseen and prepared to lead Ambassador Hart out. The diplomat stepped carefully through the corridor, guided only by instinct and subtle signs. Every step was measured and every movement counted. The specialist's presence remained invisible, a guiding force in the shadows. The syndicate's guards, already confused and distracted, did not notice the human diplomat slipping past them. Outside the chambers of the syndicate, the specialist created a final diversion. A series of alarms triggered a false emergency, drawing attention away from the extraction point. Guards rushed to respond, leaving the pathway clear. Ambassador Hart followed the subtle signals, her heart calm, her mind focused. The mission had been carefully planned, and now it was reaching its conclusion. As they moved through the station, the specialist ensured that no trace of their presence remained. Systems were restored to appear normal, leaving the syndicate puzzled and unaware of how completely their control had been undone. By the time they realized anything had changed, the human diplomat was already on the move, escorted quietly by the specialist. The extraction route led to a small, hidden shuttle bay. The shuttle was ready, pre-programmed for immediate departure. Ambassador Hart stepped inside, taking one last look at the station that had held her captive. The syndicate's influence had been dismantled without a single confrontation. It was a triumph of strategy and intelligence over brute force. As the shuttle launched, Ambassador Hart finally allowed herself to relax. She looked at the specialist, though she did not need to see them to understand their work. The calm confidence, the precise planning, and the quiet power that had rescued her were unmistakable. Humanity's representative had been returned safely, and the galaxy had no idea what had just occurred. The syndicate's leaders were left behind, bewildered and powerless. Their systems had failed, their control had evaporated, and their confidence had been shattered. They would spend weeks trying to understand how it had happened, only to realize that humans had solved the problem without a single fight, without open confrontation, and without even revealing their agent. Earth's council observed the successful extraction quietly. No fanfare, no public announcement beyond confirming the diplomat's safe return. The galaxy assumed that Earth had negotiated successfully, but the truth was far more impressive. A single individual, acting with skill, patience, and intelligence, had neutralized an entire slaver operation without violence. When Ambassador Hart returned to Earth, she was greeted with respect and relief. She shared a brief account with the Council, describing the subtle anomalies, the careful manipulations, and the invisible guidance that had led her to safety. She did not speak of the specialist's identity, for it remained a secret, known only to the highest levels of the Council. The galaxy, meanwhile, began to reassess its assumptions about humanity. Other species realized that humans did not always respond with visible force. They did not always seek immediate retaliation or public confrontation. Instead, humans acted with patience, precision, and an understanding of psychology and strategy that few could match. Reports and rumors began to circulate among the stars. Observers described how the human diplomat had been rescued without a battle, how the syndicate's operations had collapsed from within, and how the human response had been both quiet and absolute. For many, it was a revelation. Humans were not weak nor predictable. They were a species that solved problems in ways that others could not anticipate. The syndicate, meanwhile, would never recover its previous confidence. Leaders questioned their own decisions, doubted their operatives, and feared any future encounters with humans. The galaxy's criminal networks began to understand that Earth was not a planet to be underestimated. Humans had a different kind of power, one that relied on intelligence, patience, and inevitability rather than brute force. Ambassador Hart resumed her diplomatic duties with renewed respect and authority. She knew that the galaxy now watched humanity more closely, not for their fleets or weapons, but for their intelligence, strategy, and unyielding resolve. The specialist returned to hiding, ready to act again if needed, their work complete but their presence invisible. The galaxy, still unaware of the full scope of the operation, speculated endlessly. Analysts debated how Earth had managed the rescue. Some assumed negotiation, others assumed a hidden fleet, and a few guessed at unlikely espionage. None guessed the truth, that humanity had quietly orchestrated the perfect rescue without a single violent act, leaving the syndicate powerless and the galaxy in awe. And so the human diplomat had been saved, not by overwhelming force, not by weapons or armies, but by intelligence, precision, and the quiet power of one human moving with purpose. The galaxy would remember the incident for decades, though most would never know the full story. Humanity had proven once again that it was a species not to be underestimated. The stars remained vast and full of challenges, but Earth had shown the galaxy its strength. Not the strength of fleets, not the strength of firepower, but the strength of patience, ingenuity, and resolve. Ambassador Hart's safe return was a testament to that strength, and the specialist's work remained a secret legend, a quiet reminder that humans could solve even the most impossible problems with subtlety and intelligence. As the shuttle carrying Ambassador Hart entered Earth's atmosphere, she looked at the familiar blue planet below. Relief and pride filled her heart. Humanity had acted, and it had acted perfectly. The galaxy might underestimate humans again, but each time it did, Earth would be ready. Not with loud displays, not with threats, but with quiet precision that left the outcome inevitable. The day ended not with fireworks or celebrations, but with calm, confident satisfaction. Humanity had sent a message to the stars without uttering a single threat. Underestimate us at your own risk, for we solved the impossible quietly, invisibly, and completely. The galaxy had barely settled after the Karth Syndicate's collapse when reports began to surface about strange patterns in distant star systems. Trade routes once dominated by smugglers and small pirate gangs now operated without interference. Planetary governors spoke of disputes resolved before they could grow, of minor conflicts disappearing without explanation. Whispers spread across the stars, hinting that humans had intervened, not through armies, not through weapons, but through intelligence, subtlety, and strategy. Earth remained calm as always. The Council had not announced any further operations, yet humans were quietly taking steps to strengthen their influence. They sent ambassadors who were not only negotiators but also observers, capable of understanding alien cultures and anticipating threats before they became serious. These humans moved like shadows in the political landscape, their presence unnoticed but their impact undeniable. Ambassador Hart returned to her duties with renewed purpose. She knew that the galaxy would not forget what had happened, even if most misunderstood it. She also knew that the specialist, the quiet force behind her rescue, had set a precedent. Humanity could act in ways the galaxy could not predict. The diplomat shared her experiences with other humans, emphasizing observation, patience, and subtle action. Lessons learned from that mission would guide Earth's future interactions with alien civilizations. Meanwhile, the Karth Syndicate struggled to rebuild. Their operations, once thought invincible, were fractured and weak. Leaders suspected each other, unsure who had caused the collapse, and attempts to regain control only made the situation worse. Ships were delayed, communications intercepted, and allies turned cautious. The galaxy watched the Syndicate's slow decline with curiosity, unaware that humanity's actions had caused it. The specialist, now back in hiding, prepared for the next challenge. Their work was never finished, for the galaxy was vast and full of unexpected problems. Yet each operation followed a similar principle: careful observation, patient planning, and precise execution. Violence was not the first choice. Influence, psychology, and strategy were the tools that always worked. On a remote human research station orbiting a gas giant, the specialist monitored signals from distant systems. Even from this isolated location, they could see patterns forming. Small conflicts were being resolved in ways that suggested a hidden hand, subtle manipulations that prevented escalation. The specialist recognized these patterns as the beginning of a larger influence, a network of quiet power that extended humanity's reach without firing a shot. Back on Earth, the Council convened to discuss the future. They reviewed intelligence reports, trade agreements, and planetary disputes. Every detail was scrutinized, every opportunity considered. The lessons from Ambassador Hart's rescue were applied systematically. Humans could act decisively without being seen, could influence outcomes without direct confrontation, and could solve problems before they grew. Ambassador Hart attended these meetings, providing insight from her recent experiences. She emphasized the importance of understanding alien psychology, anticipating decisions, and acting in ways that left minimal trace. Her contributions were respected across the Council, and she was given the authority to implement these strategies in diplomacy and conflict prevention. The galaxy, unaware of the specialist's ongoing work, began to notice changes. Systems once chaotic were becoming orderly. Disputes that might have led to war ended quietly. Trade routes were more reliable, and communication networks operated more efficiently. Alien observers speculated on the cause, offering theories ranging from new technology to secret treaties. None guessed the truth. Humans were quietly shaping events with precision and intelligence. Meanwhile, the specialist received a new signal, an unregistered ship entering a border system near the edge of explored space. Reports indicated that this ship carried unknown cargo and avoided detection protocols. The specialist began planning, as always, with patience. They studied the ship's movements, analyzed its trajectory, and anticipated its intentions. Every step was methodical, leaving no chance for error. Ambassador Hart, informed of the potential threat, coordinated with the Council. She recommended observation and subtle intervention, avoiding direct confrontation. Her experience with the Syndicate's hostage situation guided her advice. Earth did not need to confront the ship aggressively, it only needed to influence the outcome strategically. The specialist approached the unregistered ship with caution. Every sensor, every scan, and every movement was precise. The crew of the ship, unaware of observation, continued on their course, believing themselves unobserved. Slowly, the specialist implemented a series of small interventions. Subtle changes to navigational signals, minor adjustments to communications, and quiet guidance to prevent mistakes. The crew never realized that an unseen hand was guiding their actions. Within days, the ship had entered a friendly system without incident. Its cargo was delivered safely, and its crew remained unaware of any interference. Earth's influence had prevented potential conflict, secured valuable resources, and maintained peace, all without a single confrontation. This operation, like many before it, reinforced humanity's growing reputation as a species capable of subtle, decisive action. Across the galaxy, alien diplomats began to take note of Earth's methods. Some admired the efficiency, others feared it, and a few sought to understand it. Humans were no longer just young negotiators, they were strategists, problem solvers, and silent influencers. Their reputation grew quietly, spreading not through boastful announcements, but through consistent, undeniable results. Back on Earth, Ambassador Hart reflected on the events. She understood that humanity's strength lay not in fleets or weapons, but in intelligence, patience, and strategy. Every operation, every decision, every intervention reinforced a single truth. Humans could solve problems that others could not, and they did so with calm precision. The specialist, now monitoring several systems simultaneously, prepared for the next operation. Signals from distant regions indicated potential disputes, trade irregularities, and unregistered activities. Each situation required careful planning, subtle intervention, and precise execution. The galaxy would never know the full extent of these operations, but their effects would be felt everywhere. Humanity's influence continued to grow, quietly but steadily. Diplomatic missions became more effective, conflicts were prevented before they started, and trade networks expanded without disruption. Alien species began to recognize that humans were a force unlike any other, not because of power, but because of foresight, intelligence, and the ability to act invisibly. Ambassador Hart trained new diplomats, sharing her experiences and emphasizing the importance of observation, patience, and subtle action. She taught them to anticipate outcomes, understand alien psychology, and influence events without direct confrontation. These lessons ensured that Earth's diplomatic corps would continue to operate effectively, even as the specialist handled more delicate interventions behind the scenes. In a quiet observation post on the edge of a star system, the specialist received a report. A minor skirmish was about to erupt between two trade fleets. Both sides were unprepared for subtle intervention. The specialist smiled faintly, recognizing the familiar pattern. With careful adjustments to communications and navigation, they guided the fleets to avoid conflict, ensuring safety and maintaining order. The galaxy continued to speculate about the sudden reduction in conflicts, improved trade routes, and more peaceful relations. Some credited luck, others praised new treaties, and a few suspected advanced technology. The truth, as always, remained unseen. Humanity was quietly shaping events with intelligence, strategy, and calm precision. Ambassador Hart, reviewing reports from distant systems, noted patterns that confirmed Earth's growing influence. Minor conflicts had been resolved, disputes avoided, and trade maintained efficiently. The human approach, calm, precise, and strategic, was proving effective across the galaxy. The specialist continued operations, moving invisibly across systems, guiding events, and influencing outcomes. Every intervention reinforced humanity's reputation as a species capable of solving problems without conflict, without violence, and without detection. Each successful mission strengthened Earth's position in the galaxy, ensuring peace and stability through intelligence rather than force. As the stars stretched infinitely, Ambassador Hart reflected on the journey from her initial capture to the present. She understood the full significance of humanity's approach. Calm action, patient observation, and precise intervention could achieve more than fleets or weapons ever could. The galaxy would come to recognize humans not as brash newcomers, but as intelligent, strategic, and quietly unstoppable. The specialist, still unseen, prepared for the next challenge. Signals indicated new opportunities, new potential conflicts, and new situations requiring subtle guidance. The galaxy remained unaware, yet humanity's influence continued to expand, quiet and effective. Earth, through diplomacy, intelligence, and careful intervention, had established a reputation that would endure. Ambassador Hart and the specialist, though operating in different capacities, were central to this achievement. The galaxy had witnessed humans act without aggression, yet their results were undeniable. And so, humanity's quiet power continued to shape the stars. The galaxy, still speculating about the cause of its sudden stability and order, remained unaware of the true force behind it. Humans had proven once again that the most effective strength was not in loud displays or violence, but in intelligence, patience, and invisible action. As Ambassador Hart returned to her homeworld after months of observation and coordination, she knew that the specialist was already at work, silently guiding events, preventing conflicts, and ensuring peace. Humanity's methods were subtle, yet their impact was immense. The galaxy might never fully understand, but humans had shown that they could solve problems where others could only react. The stars stretched endlessly above, full of challenges and unknowns. Yet Earth, guided by intelligence, strategy, and the quiet strength of its people, was ready for anything. Ambassador Hart looked at the sky and smiled, knowing that humanity's influence was growing, not through power, but through foresight, subtlety, and calm determination. The galaxy would come to know the truth in time. Humans were not just young negotiators or inexperienced diplomats. They were problem solvers, strategists, and a force that could act invisibly, decisively, and completely. And the specialist, ever unseen, would continue to guide humanity's quiet hand across the stars, ensuring that the galaxy learned a lesson it would never forget. Months had passed since Ambassador Hart's daring rescue, yet the galaxy was still buzzing with rumors about Earth's unusual methods. Reports of conflicts prevented before they began, trade disputes quietly resolved, and rogue ships redirected without anyone noticing had begun to spread. Alien observers speculated endlessly, attempting to understand how humans achieved such results without visible force. Many started to wonder whether humanity had developed a new kind of intelligence, something beyond fleets, weapons, or politics. On Earth, the Council quietly studied these reports, noting the patterns of subtle interventions. They were careful not to announce too much, knowing that public attention could compromise the specialists' ongoing work. The human approach relied on being unseen, so every action needed discretion. Ambassador Hart was brought into these discussions, offering insight from her recent experiences and helping guide strategy for future situations. Far from Earth, the specialist monitored several star systems simultaneously. Patterns emerged, showing potential conflicts, unregulated trade routes, and systems in need of subtle guidance. The specialist worked with precision, ensuring that any potential threats were neutralized quietly. Every intervention left no trace of human presence, yet the outcomes were undeniable. The galaxy was being shaped by human intelligence without ever realizing it. A new situation arose near the Rim worlds, where a cluster of minor systems faced a sudden shortage of critical supplies. Trade convoys were delayed due to bureaucratic errors and territorial disputes. Alien factions were preparing to claim control over the convoys, which could have escalated into violent conflict. The specialist began observing from a hidden orbital station, analyzing patterns, studying schedules, and predicting responses. Ambassador Hart, informed of the situation, coordinated with Earth's logistics and diplomacy teams. They determined that direct intervention would be unnecessary if the specialist could subtly manipulate the environment. Signals were quietly redirected, shipping schedules adjusted, and minor diplomatic messages delivered without attribution. Everything was orchestrated to prevent escalation, maintain order, and ensure that resources reached their destinations safely. As the specialist moved through the Rim world's systems, invisible to sensors and undetectable by local authorities, the operation began to show results. Delays were corrected, trade routes became efficient, and territorial disputes dissolved before they could escalate. Leaders of the factions were subtly guided through communications and indirect advice, convincing them to act in ways that maintained peace and stability. Ambassador Hart observed these developments with satisfaction. She knew that Earth's approach was unique. Humans could solve problems that others could only react to, and they did so with minimal risk, no open conflict, and no exposure. The galaxy might never understand how it happened, but the results were undeniable. Humanity's influence was quietly spreading, not through force, but through intelligence and strategy. Meanwhile, in a remote part of the galaxy, a rogue mining consortium attempted to expand operations without permission, threatening delicate ecosystems on a newly colonized world. Alien authorities were struggling to respond, unsure how to enforce regulations across such vast distances. The specialist intervened, analyzing the consortium's movements, understanding their motivations, and implementing subtle changes that redirected their operations. Contracts were adjusted, automated systems misdirected, and minor logistical errors corrected. By the time the consortium realized what had happened, they were already operating safely within established boundaries. Ambassador Hart coordinated Earth's diplomatic response, ensuring that local authorities were aware of the peaceful resolution without revealing human involvement. This careful orchestration ensured that trust was maintained, relationships strengthened, and potential conflicts avoided. Humanity's reputation as a neutral yet effective force in the galaxy grew quietly, leaving other species impressed and cautious. As months passed, multiple small crises across the galaxy were resolved in similar ways. Rogue fleets were rerouted, disputes settled, and previously chaotic trade routes stabilized. Each intervention was subtle, leaving no evidence of human involvement, yet each success reinforced the growing pattern. Earth had become a silent guardian of stability. The galaxy could sense change, but it could not pinpoint the source. Ambassador Hart trained new diplomats and analysts, sharing lessons from past operations. She emphasized patience, observation, and strategic influence. Every diplomat learned to anticipate problems, understand alien psychology, and use subtle guidance to achieve desired outcomes. These methods ensured that humanity's approach could be scaled without compromising secrecy or efficiency. The specialist continued to operate across multiple systems, invisible but effective. They were careful, precise, and patient, ensuring that every intervention produced maximum results with minimal disruption. The galaxy remained unaware of the true force behind these events, assuming that luck, coincidence, or advanced technology had caused the improvements in order, trade, and peace. One day, Ambassador Hart received intelligence of a potentially dangerous alliance forming between several minor systems. Though the alliance itself was not aggressive, its rapid formation could destabilize nearby territories and disrupt trade routes. The Council tasked her with overseeing the situation while coordinating with the specialist, who was already observing the region. The specialist analyzed the alliance carefully. By studying its leaders, personalities, communication patterns, and political goals, they developed a plan to guide decisions subtly. Strategic advice, misdirected information, and minor adjustments ensured that the alliance would form in a way that strengthened cooperation rather than creating conflict. Every action was quiet, precise, and invisible. Ambassador Hart oversaw the diplomatic messaging, ensuring that local authorities received guidance and that misunderstandings were clarified. She used subtle reasoning and persuasive language to influence negotiations, reinforcing the specialist's unseen interventions. Slowly, the alliance stabilized, forming a cooperative network instead of a disruptive force. The galaxy watched the results with curiosity. Trade routes improved, disputes diminished, and minor conflicts were prevented before they began. Analysts were baffled, attributing success to luck, technology, or diplomacy, yet no one suspected that a single species had quietly guided events across multiple systems. Meanwhile, the specialist turned attention to another emerging challenge. A transport convoy carrying essential supplies to a frontier colony had gone off course due to a navigational error. Without intervention, the convoy could have become stranded, causing shortages and tension among neighboring systems. The specialist acted quickly but subtly, sending guidance to the ship's automated navigation systems and ensuring that local authorities were alerted to minor adjustments. The convoy reached its destination safely, leaving the galaxy unaware of how easily a potential crisis had been avoided. Ambassador Hart documented these events carefully, using them as case studies for future diplomats. She emphasized the importance of observation, patience, and strategic influence. These lessons ensured that humanity's methods could be applied across the galaxy, even as the specialist continued unseen interventions. As the specialist moved from system to system, quietly solving problems and preventing conflict, the galaxy slowly began to recognize humanity's unique influence. Reports of peaceful resolutions, stable trade, and efficient cooperation became more frequent. While few could understand the source, the effect was clear. Humans were shaping the galaxy in ways that others could not. Ambassador Hart continued her work, overseeing diplomatic relations, guiding negotiations, and providing insight into human strategy. She understood that diplomacy, combined with the specialist's unseen influence, could achieve what fleets and weapons never could. Patience, observation, and careful planning had become humanity's most powerful tools. In one distant system, the specialist observed a potential environmental crisis. A newly established colony was unknowingly endangering local ecosystems, which could have caused long-term conflict with nearby planets. Using subtle influence, the specialist guided local engineers, administrators, and decision-makers towards safer practices. No one realized that human intervention had prevented disaster, yet the results were immediate and lasting. The galaxy's view of Earth continued to shift. Humans were no longer seen as just young negotiators or inexperienced explorers. They were now recognized, albeit subtly, as problem solvers, strategists, and quiet protectors of order. Their influence grew not through intimidation, but through intelligence, foresight, and the ability to act invisibly. Ambassador Hart reflected on the ongoing work, understanding that humanity's role in the galaxy had changed. The specialist's unseen hand ensured stability, while humans applied diplomacy and guidance to maintain cooperation. Together, they demonstrated that strength need not be loud, and that the most effective influence often went unnoticed. The galaxy remained vast, full of unknown challenges, but Earth was ready. Ambassador Hart knew that humanity's approach, patient, precise, and strategic, would continue to shape events across the stars. The specialist, moving invisibly, ensured that problems were resolved before they escalated, leaving the galaxy peaceful, orderly, and unaware of the force guiding it. As Ambassador Hart looked at the stars from her observation platform, she understood the true power of humanity: intelligence, strategy, and the ability to act quietly, decisively, and effectively. The specialist's work remained hidden, yet its impact was felt everywhere. Humanity had become a force not of armies or weapons, but of insight, planning, and subtle influence. And so, the galaxy continued to change, guided by invisible hands, shaped by careful minds, and influenced by humans who acted quietly but with certainty. Ambassador Hart and the specialist, working in tandem through diplomacy and unseen action, ensured that humanity's influence would continue to grow, peacefully, strategically, and invisibly, across countless star systems. The stars stretched endlessly above, but Earth's quiet power was everywhere, ensuring stability, peace, and cooperation without anyone realizing it. The galaxy had underestimated humans once, but it would never forget the results of their calm, intelligent, and invisible actions.